because it's a good song.
That's pretty awesome.
Yay! Here we go. Right back up
That
to
right
the
there is
beginning.
Pride of Lindsay, Ontario.
Hello.
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 If you want to pick me up, watch the Stumbrellas, Salvation.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a nice, happy video.
Yep. They got family members.
Yeah.
And told them they were going to have to do a dance routine. They told them that, I think, what does it say?
30 minutes?
30 minutes before they filmed them. Yeah, that's lovely.
Wonderful, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. And we won't quite clear away because I feel as though some of you want to finish the fox. That would be great. But some new... Luke, I am your papa. Well, that's a spoiler alert.
Is it still a spoiler alert?
I feel... I hope not.
It was 1980.
Yeah. Wonderful.
It was pretty crazy to me.
Yeah.
I remember it viscerally.
Do you remember it happening?
Yeah, when I watched it, because I was like, I knew there was going to be a sequel.
Because you were alive then.
And exactly. I knew there was going to be a sequel, and I also knew it was 3 years away, and I was like,
ooh.
I can't wait 3 years? That's like...
double your lifetime.
3 Christmases, and it's like, that's an impossible... That cannot be done!
Okay, wonderful. So a couple of little reminders about the Squirrel Life Project. The days are getting longer. The sun is shining. It is an amazing time to get outside if you can.
That's a reminder and a poem.
Yeah. So don't forget the Squirrel Life Project. Please go ahead and get started. The first thing you need to do is take a quiz. It is not a graded quiz. It is our way of presenting you with the information that you need in order to complete the assignment. We have Liz Porter, master's student extraordinaire from my lab, who is supporting the project. There's an email address to write with any questions that you have or any accessibility needs or anything like that. All there for you. Just don't forget. And then, spoiler alert, somebody wrote it. Awesome. Oh, and then we also posted a link to a survey. I feel like there's a lot of surveys. They are not meant to be surveys, but it's just a really good way of gathering information. So we set up a survey with 3 questions asking about you and how you're doing. So the first question is about how you're doing generally. The second question is about how you're doing in this course relative to other courses. And then the next question is a big text box for you to write whatever it is that you want to. And if you would like us to write back, there's another little box for you to put your email address. So thank you to those who have filled it out, because I think it's really important that we share some of the ways that we're feeling and what we're doing academically too. And I think one of the big challenges of this pandemic is that there has been this kind of, breakdown in communication across individuals, especially students. I think students really need to know how other students are doing and what they're worrying about, and when the test is, and when the assignment is due, and all of those things that usually happen a lot more what's the word, sort of unconsciously, need to happen a little bit more consciously. So when you are done with your fox, I will share a little bit of
and a rabbit.
The information. Is there a rabbit?
I thought it was a bow on the edge of the hat, but there's a rabbit peeking around the
fox. Oh no, that's really good. Wait till we have to totally screen. Yeah, okay. We have to screen grab this. Here we go. Save? Yeah, for sure. Because beautiful. That's a pretty good T-Rex. Can we put feathers on it?
Did you guys hear the news about T-Rex?
What about T-Rex?
It's in more than one species. The
of
paleontological world is I'm very excited. I'm very angry.
Very okay. So I'm gonna add some feathers because there we go. Thank you, Marwan. Beautiful. That's it. Feathers, very important part of the group.
We teach our I think I might be alone on this, teaching our children that the T-Rex doesn't go roar. It goes muck, 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 muck.
Yeah. So every time we have chicken in our family, Dr. Smith reminds our children that they're eating dinosaurs.
And we have a dinosaur feeder on the porch in the backyard.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to screenshot this again because now
more.
It's just even better. Okay. Today's a pretty low-key day. We realize that, low-key days every once in a while are probably a really good thing for all of us.
Low key, not Loki.
No,
There's
that's right.
no tricksing.
No
tricksting that's going on.
No, but we are going to finish up the ecology unit
But
today.
surprisingly, Tom Hiddleston is going to be guest starring. He'll be coming through that door later on.
If you want. Okay.
And he'll just read stuff and we'll listen and be like, we love you.
Okay, I'm
That
going to clear.
voice.
I'm going to clear, but I have a copy of this because it's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for drawing. That totally
I
brightens
miss
our
it
day.
already.
Yeah. Okay. So, this is just a screenshot directly from the Qualtrics tool, which is terrible. So please allow me to sort of dictate what is shown here. These are the responses to the first question that says, thinking about all your courses this semester, how are you doing? We don't mean grades only, just generally, you pick the metric, how are you doing? And the first one here, this one is thriving. This is the thriving option. And so let me just put it in big there so you can see. And everything below that is basically meh or worse, right? So getting through
Looking upstream.
is kind of meh. Yeah. This is this one here is meh. And then everything below that, this one here is hanging on. This is scraping by. This one is struggling. This is crash and burn. And
present or past tense? It was present.
Yeah. Now, of course, this is not the most scientific of surveys, but it is based on, feedback that we get from our students and all of this stuff. So the reason, why am I showing you this? I'm not showing you this to tell you that the world is terrible and we all need to just give up. Why I'm sharing this with you, why we are sharing this with you, is because one of the ways that we can gain confidence to advocate for ourselves is when we recognize that it won't just be advocating for ourselves, that most of us are in need of extra support, different supports, or different resources. Because, while not all of us are thriving all the time, more of us should be feeling like we're thriving than right now. So when you advocate, and unfortunately the university administration has made it pretty darn clear that it's up to the individual student to advocate for themselves, which we do not agree with, but in that context, understanding that when you advocate for yourself, you may be advocating for someone who is less able to do so, I think is really critical. So do not feel as though you're asking for extra. Do not feel as though you're bothering. Do not feel as though, or try not to, I know you will, but try not to feel as though you are burdening the system with some of the things that you're going through, because as you can see, most of you are going through that. Okay, and if you have any questions about that, if you need anything, please do reach out. We're more than happy to connect you with any resources. We also have been posting in the announcements resources. And if you haven't yet filled out this survey and you do want to share something with us, it is completely anonymous. You do not have to leave your email address, and we will not, kind of try to figure out who said what, because we can't. So if you do want to share something, please do feel free to go ahead and do that.
I like this a lot because I think one of the things that sometimes surveys like this do, a very entry-level positive thing, is that it reinforces to anyone who looks at the results that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Which is important.
Yeah.
But it can go farther and be more active when you think about, when you kind of look at a consequence of that realization, that in taking care of you, you'll be taking care of the others that are in that same bar with you.
Yep. And faculty just recently filled out a very similar survey.
The distribution overlay it, and it's like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, and it was really important for me because I'm a senator, I'm an elected representative, and I was feeling like, am I alone in all of these feelings that I'm having? When I go and I talk, firmly and strongly at Senate, am I just representing myself? And then getting this survey made a world of difference to me to know that, no, I'm not alone, and the concerns I'm raising are important. The other thing is that we also had about 4% of us say that we were thriving. And some of us were tweeting like, WTF, who are these people that are thriving in the context of this pandemic? And I remember that one person who wrote back and said, I wrote that I was thriving, but that's because 2 years ago I was in a massive car accident that left me immobile and unable to move. And so for me, right now, I am thriving. So just remember that context matters and that we all have different kind of experiences for how we evaluate how we're doing. And also, if you are thriving, fantastic. Well done. That's great. Okay. Is that okay? Any questions in the chat? No?
I'm not looking at the chat anymore. I thought I was.
Okay. Super. So,
Batman's coming out this Friday?
what? Amazing. Okay.
Is that with RPATs?
How do you know these things? Walking encyclopedia of culture. Okay. We are going to wrap up. Today is the last day of ecology. So if you're marking in terms of following along, this is what topic test 2 is going to end up on. Okay. And we'll start with a homework question. So if you remember, the homework was to, kind of explore what the implications or consequences might be of introducing cod back into the environment at those 3 stages. This one question is going to focus on the juvenile cod. And so let me just throw the question at you in the poll, and we can go ahead. There we go. Okay. I have the song in my head too.
Hey, now get your salvation. Bots, all of them. I made new ones of this.
Yeah.
Better images, but...
Okay. Just another few seconds. Most of you have already registered your answer.
It's a groundhog.
Amazing.
No.
Team Groundhog. Okay, just another, say, 10 seconds.
Just another 10 seconds.
Just another 10 seconds.
The caption said, say, just another 10 seconds.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And here we go. Ending poll.
It does not like captioning 2 voices.
No. Okay, so yes, the correct answer is D. The population abundance of both crab and shrimp will decrease and cause the market price of these species to increase.
So take a second. It's late in the afternoon. If you got that right, put your hands up and shake them.
Yeah.
And if you're
wrong, in
in
the library, do it like wildly.
Yeah. And if you got one of the other ones, put your hands up and shake your shoulder.
Nah, it's okay.
What's going on?
Yeah. Food webs are... Can we say this? Food webs are hypotheses about like when we interpret them, we are writing out hypotheses, right? And we'll show you. In thinking a little bit about it's hard to say what will happen. It's pretty easy to imagine what could happen. And then there are some things that definitely won't happen, right?
They're like, yeah. So they're kind of, you can see them as kind of maps of if then.
Yeah.
If this gets increased, then that will. It's also hypothetical. We add and change nodes as we better understand the players in the play.
Yeah, that's right. And so just to kind of talk a little bit about what did happen, because there are all sorts now of research on cod in the Grand Banks. So just, if you didn't join us on Monday, the whole story was that the cod collapsed, right? There were just no more cod, except for cod was really an important node within the ecosystem or the food web of the Grand Banks. So what's happened is that there has been some evidence of cod kind of trying to come back, except if you remember from last class, we did explore the notion of things sort of shifting their niche, right? We talked about the gray seals shifting their niche to feeding on smaller fish species. And we talked a little bit about what would happen if we got rid of Will and Bill krill and how there would be a shift in the predator-prey relationships as a result of that in the Antarctic food web. And indeed, this same type of niche shift seems to have happened. So with the disappearance of cod, this kind of top predator within the ecosystem, it kind of left things pretty open for squid. And then squid started to really, they were like, woohoo, opportunity. And so they started to kind of occupy the space of adult cod in a very real way, which now introduces a competitor into the ecosystem for any possible reintroduction of adult cod into the ecosystem. So there are some real things that are important. The time, is 25 years enough for generational or evolutionary changes in species, or at least, plasticity in some of their traits and some of their behaviors and some of their diet, that kind of deal. So everything kind of depends on this, and it's more about what are plausible responses rather than what are for sure responses, because oftentimes we don't know that until after the fact.
This is not unique in that either. There's a whole bunch of cases where actually a common element where fisheries, where our influence has caused the redistribution of energy in these food webs, particularly with marine systems, particularly associated with fishing and overfishing. And so species, taxa fill in gaps. And so in this case, squid, in many cases, in fisheries, it's cnidarians, it's jellyfish. Yeah. And that radically changes the food web, because although lots of things eat jellyfish, they're different than what would eat the fish. And so there's a whole bunch of redirecting that happens in restructuring. Yeah. And if you want to bring this back to how it affects humans, jellyfish blooms, which are increasing because of agricultural runoff, and then now because of energetic byproducts associated with fisheries, also then mean from a tourism perspective in many cases that it's harder to go into the water because you don't want to go into the water when you're stung.
Yeah.
And jellyfish sting. That's kind of how they live their life.
Yep. Jellyfish
got a sting.
Yep. So it totally can change, experiences of the ecosystem from, all the way up the food web and into human populations and human health. Okay.
There's a question about the arrow, and I was waiting for it to come up there. I think it's been answered.
Okay.
Go to the next slide, I think. The
next one?
Yeah. Which way is that arrow going towards starfish? It's behind our head. It's right here.
I gotta move.
No, it's right down.
There we go. So, which one?
It's going from zooplankton to starfish, I believe.
From zooplankton to starfish.
So the arrowhead.
It's really hard to tell, eh?
But the arrowhead is arriving at starfish, and in this diagram, meaning that they are
eat. No, but I don't think it's that. I think it's juvenile cod that are eating starfish.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a straight line to. I think that line goes to sandlance, but it's coming from sandlance to zooplankton.
Forgot my protractor.
Yeah, we'd have to like line it up. Yeah. Super, it's complex. And so, yeah, a little bit of kind of interpretation is often needed. Yeah.
Can confirm I have been stung by a deadly jellyfish. I need to now know.
We want all the details.
Was it Irkutjindi? Were you in like Australia or something, or where were you?
I got stung once, but it wasn't deadly. Anyway, we're waiting.
When you
for
say
details.
deadly, it's I'm thinking
Like
the
Nanowar?
Irkutjindi, or no, like the cubozoan that closes
Ooh.
Australian beaches all the time.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Portuguese man of war. on the
Haha, I
Adriatic
called
Sea.
it. That sucks, and I'm glad you're still with us. Oh my goodness.
Now I'm sure you were placated in your pain by thinking this is a colony. This is an organism of organisms doing different things with different roles. And
Yeah.
tell me nobody tried to pee on you and you didn't have a Friends episode.
No.
It's like that does not work.
We don't talk about that. But Smith is right. Portuguese man of war is a colony of individuals. It is fascinating biologically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so check it out if you haven't yet.
And they're unknown to most of us in the terrestrial environment, but a scyphozoan biologist said this to me once. If an alien lands on Earth, more than likely it will land in the oceans first, and more than likely the first big thing that it sees that's alive will be a scyphozoan. And so it's like they're this
Amazing.
flagship.
They're a flagship species.
Yeah.
Speaking of species that can harm you, there's my transition. Did you see it?
That was very good.
Okay, so speaking of species...
I'm going to take this off the rails. Like, you can keep trying to bring us back to the rails, but I'm going to stay on target.
So we're back to the dairy bush. We're back to the different woodlots. We're back to Browns Woods. We're back to Campus Ravine and the Arboretum and all of that, because we're going to wrap it all up today.
And we're going to learn a swear word.
And we are? What are we going to learn?
That bottom bullet. That has to be a swear word.
No, it isn't. What it is, though, is something that we all should know about, because giant hogweed is an invasive species. It was introduced, so it isn't endemic to this area. It was thought to be introduced through shipping containers. Is that right? Like that go to garden centers and things like this. Yep. And giant hogweed is the result, and it is a pretty interesting plant. If you're into sort of B-movie sci-fi kind of world, it reminds me of the Day of the Triffids. Like if we actually had like a real triffid, it would be giant hogweed. Although not nearly as active or as deadly, it does still cause quite a burn. So the furocoumarins is this
Furocomarine!
Yeah, this like sap that if you get it on your skin, it's photosensitive. It very similar in terms of photosensitivity, like poison ivy or that kind of thing, except it is extreme in its response and can cause like up to 3rd degree burns on your skin. So
it's nasty. Just
a PSA, like a public service announcement, don't touch them. But if you do, cover it immediately so that there's no sunlight, and get to a sink and use soapy water over and over and over again to scrub it off of your skin as much as possible. It will still burn, but it will not sort of eat through your skin.
So it was named after, that species epithet, the second part there was named after Paolo Mantagazzi, who is an Italian traveler and anthropologist.
Amazing.
And I'm wondering who he offended in the botanical world that they named this noxious plant after him.
I don't know. Maybe he used to like tell people, "Oh, go touch that plant." This is like a joke.
Or if you hung out with Paolo in the sunlight, he was like, "No!" So painful.
Okay, so why are we telling you about giant hogweed? Because we want you to kind of reflect a little bit on whether or not the presence or absence of invasive species will affect your decisions in terms of management plans. So what if we told you that not only are we doing research on giant hogweed at the University of Guelph, so this is a giant hogweed, this is what it looks like sort of in the late season. And this is what you should not do, which is take photos holding on to it. Don't do that.
Don't be the person that asks for that picture
because
either.
this is a very mild reaction that can happen. And you can see this person, you know, these are treated and healed, but these are like permanent scars to the giant hogweed. But what if we told you that giant hogweed was found in North Campus Ravine? Okay.
Run away!
Run away! Yeah. Sometimes you see them like as people's ornamentals in front of their house, like as part of their like garden beds, and you're like, no, cut it down. Okay, so giant hogweed. So this is the last bit of information that you're going to get about the different woodlots. Okay, and finally, if you remember, there was quite a distribution at the beginning of the unit when we asked you which one would you get rid of. I think most of you were going, you know, between these two. There were some like, you know, sort of not pro dairy bush sentiments at the beginning. But now, if you had to make your final decision based on everything that you've learned from the course link unit and based on stuff that we've talked about, if you had to pick one to get rid of, and I know that there's a big team none, cool, but if you had to pick one, which one would you pick to develop into, I don't know, a suburban area? So go ahead and use your stamps. This ravine sounds sketchy. One of you wrote. No, I don't think somebody's asking. I don't think it is true that it is actually there, but just imagine if it were. Yeah, wild parsnip, same thing. Same thing. Don't touch wild parsnip. Cool. Okay, so a lot of hate for the North Campus Ravine. Totally agree with you for all the reasons. But wonderful. Thank you so much. So
remember this episode, because you're going to be an alum one day, and then the university will seek after you for money, and you will have influence. You have influence now, and then you'll have an influence as an alum.
Yep.
And at some point, they're going to try to develop the dairy bush field. And that'll be a mistake, and we'll have to fight it. And if there are alum who recognize that, that will be better.
Yep. And it's true. The community can't. Oh, Team None. We have to just. Our video is actually right on the top there. So there we go.
Oh, look
Team
at that.
None is getting bigger. That's great. Totally fine. Yeah. And these are real scenarios, real situations, right? With the university selling off bits of property for development. There was recently a bit of a not a bit of a no that let me rephrase. There was a very important conversation that was happening about where the new honeybee research center was going to go. And originally it was really going to influence the organic farm that we have at the university. We have, if you haven't seen it yet, a spectacular organic farm. Like this is like needs to be celebrated across Canada, how beautiful it is. And when you go there in the spring and the summer, especially like in the middle of July, if you just go there and just sit quietly, and there are spaces for visitors to sit quietly and enjoy, and you look up into the tree, it vibrates with the number of pollinators. And they found like hundreds of species of pollinators. And a honeybee research center is a very different thing. Honeybees, the ones that would be part of the research center, are really domesticated and really not part of the natural ecosystem that the organic farm is relying on. And so they were going to go right next door, and that was going to really devastate the endemic pollinators that were part of the organic farm. So conversations, very serious conversations, led also by Professor Karen Houle from the philosophy department, was a very strong voice in this, and they've moved it. It's going in a different place, which is great. It's good for honeybee research, and it's good for the organic farm. So we can have an influence on the decisions to develop land and you know, preserve biodiversity, which was the leading argument. So yay. Okay, and shout out to Dr. Hull, because she's amazing. And if you can take a philosophy course with her, take a philosophy course with her.
Also because apparently one of our transcription services, the Zoom one, thinks that you're saying Professor Cool.
Oh, yeah. No, if you don't mind, maybe some of you want to take a really cool philosophy course that kind of like integrates social action, like evidence-based action. Dr. Karen Poole. There. There you go. If you can, take a course with her. She's amazing.
She's cool.
Yep. And a lot of the food that we serve on campus, like in Creelman, comes from the organic farm. So, yeah, it's not for nothing that Guelph has an amazing reputation for good food. Okay. So, wrapping up the global biodiversity patterns, and we've been kind of poking you a little bit to think about how we might test or how we might, what we might hypothesize about the different distributions of species, like how species got there or how they didn't. So that's what we're going to do, just to kind of wrap up this unit, to kind of guide you through some of that thinking so that you can practice it when you're preparing for your topic test 2.
So when we showed you this, you told us all about the importance of precipitation and temperature in terms of mapping at a great big scale. And it does a lot.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do everything.
It doesn't do everything. And we can even go bigger than biomes, right?
Yeah.
So let's go for a moment to biogeographical regions. What do they use? Like if it's not temperature and precipitation, because there are many biomes, like in the Palearctic, right? There's like a whole whack of biomes. So what's the variable?
Well,
I don't know. But there is quite a bit of phylogeny that's involved in this, right? Sort of the evolutionary history of these spaces. And geology, exactly. So,
although the marine waterways of Indonesia, that sounds like a band. I would go out to see the marine waterways of Indonesia.
Very good. Okay. So biogeographical regions are even bigger than biomes. Okay. And really what they can allow us to appreciate is the sort of the geological history, the vicariance history of the species that we have on the planet, and how they may be related. One of the kind of the clues for that is to take a look in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah, because you look at it across, and I think probably from the first time you owned a globe or a map or looked at these as puzzle pieces, you think, that shoulder of Brazil really looks like you could tuck it right into the African continent. But take a look at the southern tip of Africa, Antarctica, and the bottom of Chile and Argentina.
Yep, and here.
And the islands of Antarctica, often known as Middle Earth.
No. So this is the Antarctic bioregion, okay? And certainly it's missing there should be a big red blob over here. Although we don't really know what it totally looks like underneath. We know that most of it is just an island archipelago.
It's probably got Rick Astley. It's waiting.
But the fact that this area is part of the Antarctic bioregion and that this part is also part of it really does support the hypothesis or the notion that these things were once connected, right? And that they were once in a more southerly latitude. The bioregions then can help us, the biogeographical regions can help us understand a little bit about the geological history of where things were when things evolved kind of deal, right? So they're just huge things. Obviously we can't focus conservation efforts on Greenland and think that we're going to be supporting conservation efforts, on the Baja Peninsula, right? Like, clearly conservation efforts or sort of political actions and things like this have to happen on a much smaller scale. But they do help us understand some of the evolutionary history of things.
But I think this is a neat opportunity to think about how the importance of geology here is pulled into tight focus because of the distant things that are very similar, but also the very proximate places like in the waterways of Indonesia and Wallace's Line, where the immediately adjacent, from a terrestrial perspective, contemporary perspective, are incredibly different and have so close to zero overlap in their fauna and flora. And that, think about trying to explain that in an era before we understood plate tectonics. It's very hard to do.
Yep. And the person that proposed plate tectonics was ridiculed.
As you might, sure.
Sure.
I'm floating right now. Even,
Yeah.
You're cut off. You're
done.
done.
Continent is moving away. Sure, sit down. You know,
can you feel it?
Water?
I can feel it.
Yeah. So ridiculed. You know, as often right ideas are.
Let's call them correct ideas.
Correct ideas. Yeah. So. So it took a long time for people to kind of get on board with something that, like, now we all know, right? Certainly, you know, at the time, I think it was only in the 60s that people were like, maybe that's true. Obviously all of the geological as well as the biological evidence is there to support the notion that, you know, the continents used to be connected in different ways.
But even there's a comment in the chat to talk a little bit more about its role with biogeography, but because you mentioned the 60s and the 70s, it was in the field of biogeography, of mapping biology onto big patterns, onto maps. There were kind of two competing camps that really looked at the same patterns and emphasized different mechanisms. And one of them was the Vicariant camp that was like, we can explain at a big level a lot of this by where those masses were and what they were attached to, as the majority of the species, or the species that were the ancestors for our contemporary species, came into being. And then there was the kind of another camp of historical or dispersal biogeographers that were like, no, it's a filtering process, and that's what we need to emphasize. Yeah. And it's kind of a ridiculously ivory tower scenario of insisting. Could you imagine trying to insist that only one of those answers could be right, when, as biologists, you all know it's both?
Yeah.
It depends.
It depends. So much so.
South Africa to the tip of Chile, it's more about vicariance.
Yeah.
It's less about swimming.
Totally. So here's kind of the thing that sets us up for understanding vicariance and understanding the stories of these biogeographical regions, is this, you know, these similarities that are so separate from each other.
Isn't there a thing where New Zealanders collect maps where New Zealand is not labeled?
Yes. Because we often forget New Zealand on maps. We more often forget Antarctica, but still. Okay. So why are species found where they are? Imagine a distribution map. And this is a really good way of, you know, studying, preparing for topic test number 2, is like, just Google your favorite animal and the word distribution map. So if you want, do like elephant distribution map, or do
tiny seed-eating dinosaurs.
Okay. Or do something else. And then you can take a look and go, I wonder what concepts are at play here. What true or false statements could I make that, you know, could support this distribution, or could, you know, not support this distribution? So that's kind of a big tip for how to study, to apply the knowledge that we're hoping that you're following along with. So here's a distribution map of various species of warblers, right? And I hope that there are some curious things here for you. So what might be some of the reasons for why these species are where they are? Go ahead and like write on the slide,
throw it in the chat,
however it is that you want. But what based on like what we've been talking about, or stuff that you know, what are some of the reasons for why these species might be where they are?
Or where they aren't.
Also. Jared's drawing. Oh, good. Yes, for sure, right? They're not going to be over top of the water if they can't survive in the water. So there are these natural barriers. Really good.
Yeah, competition.
I hope I interpreted that right, Jared.
Food, competition, climate, food. They evolved there. Environmental conditions, food, human impacts.
Yeah, founder effect, question mark. Own it. Yes. Don't ask. It's absolutely correct.
Mountains, question mark.
Food type. Yeah. Climate.
That's a question and a direction.
Oh, nice. Somebody's put a desert here, right? So it may be temperature, it could be precipitation or moisture, it could be a bunch of things. Somebody's writing mountains. Yep, super good. Yep, Samuel's drawing the mountains.
Deserts of Michigan.
Really great. Okay.
Yeah, mountains, coastal areas.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Proximity to water.
Yeah. Marwan's going too cold up north. Yes.
Yep.
Proximity to water. Good. Humidity. Very, very good. Yeah. All of these things, super good. And so because those species are where they are, most of the time we can assume that that's where they can thrive, right? They may be able to do better somewhere else, but at least where they are is enough for them to be able to thrive. And it can tell us then a lot about the adaptations and the natural history of those species, right? So, think about maybe taking a look at the golden-cheeked warbler versus the black-throated green warbler. So let's take a look. This one here, the golden-cheeked warbler and the black-throated green warbler. Which one would you think would have a more broad diet? Which one would eat more things? Go ahead and just stamp on the bird. Super. Okay. Now, we can't know that for sure, but the hypothesis would be supported by this distribution map, right? Okay, great. Do you have another one you want to throw out?
So take a look at the distribution of the black-throated gray warbler and the hermit warbler.
Ooh.
And I see that I'm looking at this area here in northern California. What kind of hypotheses would you make about their diet?
Ooh, good. So what could you infer about the diet of the hermit warbler and the black-throated gray warbler given their distributions?
One hypothesis is left the chat.
Exploit different resources in the same area, question mark. Own it, exclamation mark. Yes.
Their diets may slightly differ. Yes.
Yeah.
Well done.
Good.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Right.
So this is a great model, sorry to interrupt, example of the kind of studying to do. This is well after you've read your notes and synthesized them. That's lovely. That's like day one, the morning of day one that you study. And then the rest of the time, find maps like this, find graphs of your favorite organism and pose these questions. It's somewhat helpful to do it for yourself. I would say there's arguments and lots of evidence that it's more helpful to do it with friends because they can do it back and you're going to get feedback on how they respond to your question and how you're responding to their questions. And
Yep, for sure. So if this was on a topic test, for example, we might say, which of the following statements are supported by the data. So a statement that would be supported would be that the hermit warbler eats large insects while the black-throated gray warbler eats small insects. And it wouldn't be for you to go on Google to actually find out. The idea is this hypothesis supported by the data set, right? Or we could say the hermit warbler and the black-throated warbler eat exactly the same diet. That would be unsupported, right? Because they have this overlapping area, right? So
true or false? The golden-cheeked warbler has a more broad diet than the black-throated green warbler.
Yeah, exactly. False, right? Good.
I giggled at that. They're on a Californian diet. That was the hypothesis there. So literally true.
Good one.
There's raisins all over their salad.
Yeah, wonderful. And goat cheese.
Yeah. Oh, hungry now. I'll be back.
Okay, super good. Wonderful. Well done. Okay. So, next, imagine this observation. You want to walk them through it?
Yeah, sure. So we have this lovely weevil, and its distribution in Middle Earth is principally on the South Island, okay, where there are fewer orcs. But near the Cook Strait, there is one population, and it's resilient. It's not just that they found one and they're like, it came on a boat. It's like, no, it is there on the North Island, only at this one location.
Breeding. So when you mean resilient, you mean breeding.
Yeah, it's not just like, I hit it with my car and then they're gone. It's like, no, we can find them and they reproduce and they eat and they do all the things. But it doesn't extend farther north. And it seems to only be in that one location. And so as a vicariant biogeographer, or someone who's interested in the distribution of diversity of life and how that is affected by history, you might say, well, we could go out with our limited budget and we could survey on the South Island and say, why, what do they like? What is it they're eating? What is it that, who's eating them? Are those things absent and present in the North Island? To what degree? What's their thermal tolerance? And those would all be good questions.
So, okay. Yeah. So, imagine you're given this map and we ask you, or you are asked, to come up with a series of hypotheses for why this distribution is the way it is. I'm being corrected on my Middle Earth geography. Yeah, I saw that.
And the orcs, yeah, they are usually really, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, okay. So, please feel free to write on the slide or in the chat, what are some hypotheses that would support this distribution?
Well, that's good wordplay again. You shall not pass. We should have, for next year, I'm going to get the...
A predator?
Yep.
Yep. Lives on the north? Super. Yep. Yeah.
You can use the chat too. It'll be quicker.
Yeah. Okay. The weevil relies on for food was...
Elevation.
Yeah, that's good.
Elevation, wind, flying distance for travel, weather and food conditions. Can't cross the water. The water is certainly part of this.
Geological
Its
barriers.
Diet consists of food found inland, not coastal.
Yeah, climate.
Who's eating the orcs?
Who's eating the orcs? Climate, like it gets really cold or it gets really hot or whatever it is. Yeah. Okay, windward, leeward side of the mountain, really good. Yep. Yeah, extirpated on the North Island, so nice. So it had to move to the South Island.
So we look for some pesticide applications, so human influences. Right. So we've got all sorts of things about some abiotic conditions, the wind, the water, the temperature, the geological barriers. We've got questions about predators. We've got questions about elevation, which ties into that. Prey, so what kinds of food, coastal versus inland.
So to study for the topic test, all of these are plausible hypotheses. All of these, with the information that you are given right now, are supported by the map that you see here. All of these would be true, right? Okay, so you need some more information to find out what the truth is for this species because of its context and everything, right? Because there isn't, at this stage, there are a whole bunch of possible answers that have happened to multiple species around the world, right? And so let's give you a little bit more information to kind of dive into what happened with this species. So the two possibilities are dispersal and vicariance, and you've identified them. You've got that. Great. What actually happened is this.
Yeah. So, and you were there talking about geological barriers, and when you talked about the importance of the water and can't cross the water, and the domino that triggered for these researchers was the fact that can't cross the water. Has there always been water here? And no.
No.
During the extent of a previous glacial maximum, there was not water there. And the waters were distributed differently. And so that was on the South Island. It was continuous with that which we see now.
Yep.
So context is everything.
So cool, right?
Yeah.
It totally, and that's not going to be what happened to giraffes, right? It's just going to be different. The possible hypotheses are still kind of the same, right? It's either dispersal or vicariance. But what actually happens is going to be different depending upon the context. Not only, the natural history of the species itself, but the environmental context as well.
And so their question in the chat, so would this be vicariance? And it's like, yeah, it is, because it's, but not in the way that we often think of it.
Not in the way of continental drift.
Yeah, of coming apart, or of mountain ranges forming inside of the middle of a distribution and separating things. This is the water.
Yeah.
rising
Yeah.
and separating
And
things.
we know that it's not vicariance. We know that it's vicariance because it's not dispersal.
Yeah.
Dispersal is about the organism moving or the species moving. And this is about everything else moving.
The environment moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vicariance is a tricky one, and it's the one that we all kind of struggle with the most. So don't worry about that.
It's gorgeous.
It's fantastic. It's cool, right?
Yeah.
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 Cool. Okay. So just to kind of wrap up a little bit, you were asking about biogeographical regions and how it all kind of comes into play. And I just think this stuff is super fascinating. Because the continents used to look like this. And if you think about it, we only really show depictions up to about, 300 million years ago, 600 million years ago, something like this, where it was like all one big, massive, supercontinent. But the planet has been around for like a couple billion years more than that. And we never kind of go even further back beyond that, mostly because there isn't really a history of life beyond that. But, the continents have been breaking up and coming together for a lot longer than just this one time, right? There's been there's evidence of multiple breakups, or ideas of multiple breakups. So anyway, we know more about the last one because there is this biological record as well as the geological record. And this is kind of, what it looks like. And what you can see then is similarities of fossilized species across in these swaths across the continents. And if you connect them, you get a better understanding of how the continents were connected. But also importantly, you get a better appreciation of what the climatic conditions were at the time as well. Because we see here, for example, a fern in Australia. I can believe that. That's fine. But we also see fossilized evidence of this fern going through Antarctica. And I have seen them. I have been to the beaches of Antarctic islands, and I have seen the fossilized ferns. It is so cool. And so that is evidence of not only sort of more connectedness, right, but also of a very different environment, right, a much warmer, much more humid environment. And so we can use the biological records to reconstruct not only the geology, but also the environmental history.
Amazing.
Wow.
We have to let people go.
We got to say goodbye. So here's some homework, some numbers. Take a look at it. And we have an accompanying question that you can kind of work through in order to better understand what's going on here. Take care.
Take care of you. Take care of those around you.
Bye.
See you next week.